Okay, Thursday it is. Things seem to be, I've seemed to get everything working here. So, what's going on, Adam?
Everything looked good on my end here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm monitoring Periscope. I know we're live. Uh, I wanted to use the new computer today, and um, it was a gargantuan heavy lift. You have no idea how complicated it was. I was like knee deep in all kinds of shit, and I overcame everything. Everything. The computer is working, everything's great. And then the weakest link was this little wireless headset. It's a Bluetooth headset. It would not pair with this new computer.
Hmm.
And none of the other older ones would either. I suspect there's something wrong with Bluetooth, but by then it was 10 minutes to 10. So it's going to, you know, that's what I'll be doing till 4 in the morning. But anyway, the Mac is still here. And now that thanks to Defango, we've got the right setting. This is not going to be a problem. We're streaming at the usual now. I think it's 3,500 kilobits per second, which is in 1280 by what is it? We're doing 1280 by 720. So if you're watching it on a big screen TV, we're good to go. Other than that, I saw that Scott Adams is on. His new shtick is he was doing when I was listening to him like 2-3 years ago. He had this thing called the simultaneous sip, where all the chodes get their little coffee beverages and they all sip it at the same time. Right? But now the foreskin sucklers, they have a new thing and it's called the simultaneous swaddle. So he's
That sounds comforting.
the infantilization curve is real for him. I think what's next? You're going to have like the simultaneous enema. Why not? I mean, that's the direction he's going. So, yeah.
Yeah, his tweets are schizophrenic. Like one day he's up, the next day he's down. But he's one of these guys, never satisfied with the response of the government, and then of course everybody's lying to you, and of course he's right because he draws cartoons for a living and you don't, and that we're supposed to give out every known logistical aspect of our response to this pandemic, just in case our enemies in China and Russia don't already know our capabilities or lack thereof, should they wish to unleash a future biological agent against us. Let us get down to the brass tacks of itemizing our capabilities, our supply routes, our chains. Let's do that, because God knows they need a roadmap on how to screw us over real good, should they ever choose to. Listen, what are you going to tell a guy like that? We broke down specific and gross and bulk numbers. We discussed the so-called air bridge, which is maximizing our ability to get whatever goods and PPE that are not being consumed already in this worldwide pandemic, getting it here. New York is hemorrhaging supplies. It's almost, it seems as if de Blasio and Cuomo woke up yesterday and realized that this was a pandemic and that New York would be at the epicenter of any pandemic that we would ever be the forefront of. I'm just starting to run into that fatigue, battling up against these morons that assume that Trump closed the economy, like he put out a sign when Chevy Chase gets to Wally World, sorry folks, America's closed. That's not quite how it works. So you would need to understand what a constitutional republic is, and you would need to understand federalism and all kinds of lessons that I have neither the time nor patience to get into for these people. It is a state by state, and in some case, county by county decision. They have pretty near autonomy to function to protect their health and safety of the citizens they were elected to represent. All Trump is doing is listening to the scientists, as they say. And no, it's not Dr. Fauci sitting in a room like a little miniature king of the universe telling people what's good and not good for, the Americans and their response to the COVID-19. I mean, it's a giant task force. It's got military doctors. It's got Dr. Birx, who's relatively known as the point person, not Dr. Fauci. Dr. Birx has much more influence over the president and what he decides or not to decide to recommend. Ron DeSantis had some different perspective about what to do with his state up until yesterday or the day before, and when he called the president to talk about it, the president didn't advise him either way. It's his state, it's his responsibility, it's his sworn constitutional duty as governor to protect his people the best way he can. All we can do is provide the information from our military, uh, doctors, our NIH, National Institute of Health, and of course the CDC, and then other experts that are working with the task force like Dr. Birx. Pretty clear we can't depend on the WHO, and we don't. And that's pretty good because we would have been using a whole bunch of faulty test kits a month ago, and it would have caused mayhem in our system. So I want to remind everybody two very important points that all of these people don't understand. Well, I'm going to add another point to this, Glenn, that's gone over everybody's head, and that is, of course, the phase 3 spending bill that went through. So we're going to start with number one, and I just covered it. It's not Trump's call. The CDC puts the guidelines together with the National Institute of Health, the military, their medical career officers in their military branch or whatever handles this type of stuff, and they work in a big giant task force setting, and they decide what they would recommend, and they make the recommendations, and then of course, as any federalist society would do, a collection of states will then utilize their 10th Amendment rights that are not expressly otherwise mentioned in the Constitution to control their own fate. And that's what they're doing. If they want National Guard, they activate their National Guard. And if they want reimbursed for it, they call up the administration and say, we're doing this. Will you sign off under Title 32 authority? Of course, Trump says yes. These are not, this is not a dictatorship here. We don't shut down economies. We don't tell which industries can keep going and what's essential and not essential. We just don't. That's a state by state issue. So if you're upset about it, call your governor. And if your county or city level representatives have done something you think is over the top, you call them. Stop bashing Trump on social media as if he tanked his own economy on purpose because Dr. Fauci told him to. I mean, it's the most anti-intellectual argument I could possibly make, and that's what they're making all over the internet. So, and my number two point beyond that is that these people that say we could have found a way around this and kept our economy going and just kind of marched through this. I guess we call them the ride it out or herd immunity group, and still doubting every case and reported death in Europe or here or anywhere. And they just said we should have just marched through it. They were using Sweden briefly as a good example until, of course, Sweden's cases shot up about 40% in like 2 days because they were not practicing, social distancing and that thing. So, and again, my second point is to all those people that still contend that there was a chance that we could have marched through and kept a strong economy. What do you think is going on right now? I mean, you look at the numbers. Okay, we're slowly getting our mind around a couple 100,000 American cases. We're slowly getting our head around thousands and thousands, multiple, almost 4,000 will be dead in New York by the end of this week if they're not already in the state of New York. Pretty much 9/11 numbers already for the New York City and we're not even close to cresting out. So say we had just marched on, how much worse would it have been? Is right there in front of your face. I mean, how could you say that we could have kept open Broadway and Times Square and it would not be exponentially worse? If they're already out of ICU beds and they're down to their last 6 ventilators or whatever the hell he's saying, imagine where you would be had you not forced them by shaming them into finally doing something to react to this. So no, the economy would of course collapsed. I mean, just absolutely collapsed because New York is the epicenter of our economy and number 2 GDP producer. And frankly, the world economy itself is collapsing due to shutting down to the coronavirus. So it wasn't like we were going to be happily sitting around in America completely insulated from this had we just kept our herd immunity thing going and walking around like we do in an average influenza season. Absolutely insane. And I would remind everybody the average influenza season doesn't kill 100,000 Americans because we have effective vaccinations right now. And had we not, then yeah, we would probably be losing on the high end 70 to 100,000 or more. So it's just the flu crowd have been proven scientifically wrong beyond all measure of a doubt now already. Just 2 weeks into it, that this thing is not at 0.1% mortality rate, much higher for now. Hopefully that flattens out a little bit. And we have no idea what's going to happen when it hits other states, if it's going to react the same way it did in New York. Hopefully not, because other states were a little bit smarter and more prepared. So, that's my second point. There was no option to just not do anything and ride it out. It would have caused massive mayhem, death on the streets, and the economy would have collapsed way worse than what it is at its current position. And number 3, for all the smartasses out there, like Mark Levin tonight on Hannity saying, we're ruining our country, we're spending it into debt, and this is ridiculous, and blah, 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 blah. Has no understand what authorized money is versus money that is literally appropriated to be spent. Congress has authorized up to $2.2 trillion for us to cover the costs that our employers and employees in this country will incur due to this virus. It is not all going to be consumed. There's oversight in that. It's most likely we'll probably spend most of that. If this thing goes 8 weeks, it's obviously gonna eat into 2.2 trillion, which after all kind of goes pretty quickly when you're throwing in the entire airline industry, the entire luxury vacation industry, the Hollywood, everything. Like you're just shutting it all down. So, and then of course you have the 4 extra trillion that he doesn't understand. Mark Levin is saying that it's for the Fed to loan out as bailout money. Obviously, that's not even close to true. It's authorized liquidity that, in conjunction with the Department of Treasury, we can do certain things we couldn't do before that we need a congressional authorization for, and to print commercial paper, things of that nature, where we couldn't do before. It had to be done under the old system. So we're basically shoring up the top end of our economy so that our large companies don't go belly up, and that'll lead to mass unemployment where you can't get back on your feet because there's no companies to hire you. So it's just devastating to the White House narrative to watch all of these morons who claim to be experts, in some cases constitutionalists and others, not understand simple budgetary details, constitutional respects of the Articles 1, 2, and this simplistic notion that I corrected the other night, and I'll correct it again now, that all of a sudden we're going to be debt laden to the point where we're exposed, and this is just a ridiculous notion. As long as the world is going through the same thing we are, who do you think is going to come out on top of this thing? We are. We'll come out first, strongest. We'll be in the best position. We have the most wealth. And people love to talk about things like I mentioned the other night, if you still don't get it, I'll repeat it one more time. They like talk about passing on debt to your grandkids or your kids. And they said the average American actually will owe $70,000 as a part of the federal debt per household. When in actuality, if you break it out in converse, if you break out the assets, total assets, once liquidated by America, every household in America would have 3 times that amount of money owed to them by who would ever purchase it. So we are by far the wealthiest country in the world. We can print money to the extent that we desire and can facilitate through consumerism and the import export with our trade. As long as the world is purchasing our debt, we're golden. And some countries are looking to get some cash reserves right now, so they're selling some treasuries. But that's fine with us because that just puts more money directly into our U.S. Treasury, so that we're not taking out as much when we're trying to save some of these businesses. So this bill is a godsend. And to hear people, and then I heard the always fanatical Matt Gaetz on with Hannity, and he does not understand what he voted for either. And he's talking about this Breitbart line about 350 million people, $350 million in the bill for immigrants and refugees. Well, he doesn't understand is that money is appropriated to an existing ME, which is a mandatory expenditure line inside the Department of State's budget that has a bureau that oversees this stuff. And it doesn't go to Mexico. It doesn't go to Costa Rica. It goes to make sure that these refugees are not to basically get sick and die in the middle of a desert somewhere, or have the Kurd problem. It goes to the Kurds. It goes to people fleeing Yemen. I mean, it's a humanitarian thing. It's to call it a $350 million giveaway to migrants, and we're not talking about our border issue, and we couldn't be more emphatic about not what we're doing. And non-essential stuff is not happening at the border. We sent down another 500 troops to make sure that the border patrol is shored up down there. I mean, people, even in Congress, don't understand what the hell is going on here. And it's all made to, I guess, they see this burgeoning movement that's now a thing on Twitter where spending is out of control. The president is being, quote unquote, boxed in by the experts and the scientists. He's shutting down the economy. He's going to lose because we're going to be in a recession. And this is another great line. This was from Robert Barnes, who has decided that he's going to replace Alex Jones as chief tinfoil head. And the latest from Robert Barnes was no president in American history has ever been elected during a recession, when in fact, I could easily, without even cracking open a book, I could name 4 off the top of my head. But no one wants to hear it because they're in Chicken Little, everything's going to hell, and don't believe what you read, and only half of what you see, and none of what you hear. It's like fake news has enveloped itself into something that it's impossible for us to trace down any semblance of fact versus fiction. And it's just, to me, it's just, I suppose it would be like, a modern scientist getting dropped into the Middle Ages and watching them, try to figure out why they, have the bubonic plague and don't realize that they're, washing their face with the same bucket of water that they wash their ass with, or they think it's not a bad thing to have, rats running. Oh, it must be the rats. Couldn't be the fleas that are causing the bubonic plague, right? So for me, it's like watching a bunch of people that don't understand what's going on. But in real time, for me, it's just devastating that good working, or used to be working in some cases, people that were really about Trump's response to this and the economic response to it are all of a sudden being poisoned with all these stories that you remember last week. It was everybody freaking out about these H-2Bs visas that were being issued by the DHS. And Breitbart put a big article out saying, well, historic unemployment in America is coming. We're bringing in more foreigners than ever, which in fact, I said, that of course was issued a long time ago, and Trump would kill it as soon as he saw it. And what did he do today? He killed it. So it's just remarkable how ignorant people are and how predictable this all will be. And if you really think that the economy is going into a major depression, then you have no idea what $6 trillion of liquidity and increased ability for the Treasury to work with its Federal Reserve, which is like, it's almost not fair. It's almost not fair to to the rest of the world, because it's like we kind of dipped our toe into a temporary period. And of course, all this stuff is sunset. All this stuff ends the day the president ends the emergency declaration. All this authority goes away. Not like we lose and Biden comes in and has $6 trillion to play with. The point is, this is the kind of stuff China does. It plays with its own currency. It picks the winners and losers, and it stabilizes the markets and supply chains and everything else. And oh, by the way, there's a shit ton of military expenditures in this bill that are just going to beef up our already massive spending increases, which is very good news. And now, because of this pandemic, we're going to be the most prepared country in the world. Matter of fact, we're going to be by far the leading country on preparedness for any type of epidemic or pandemic or anything like that. And it's going to streamline all types of innovation. It's going to have the FDA finally get off its big, lazy, 100-year-old ass. And we are just plowing down regulations like you wouldn't believe. I mean, we are streamlining everything. And by the time this whole thing is over, we're going to be leaner and meaner and ready to rock than we ever were before, because a lot of dead weight was cut off. A lot of employment that was pushing the edges, that was unnecessary, will be shifted over to telework and other issues like that, and contract work. And we're going to be in a much better position. And plus, their healthcare argument will go to hell if we can keep this thing where it is right now across the board and contain it and deal with it the way we are. So, hell of a long opening statement for me, but it's a day of frustration
I
watching all this.
noticed today that the Democrats have postponed their convention now. I think it's July or August, isn't it?
Yeah, they said at least August or something. That's what they're looking
So
at right
if
now.
they do August, you're really only talking about 8 or 9 weeks then until the election. Um, I mean, it seems to me that it's not that's not a healthy sign. I don't think from the Dems. Are they? You think
No.
they're trying to use this as a way to sort of put things off to the very end to buy themselves more sort of thinking room about what to do if they?
Yeah, it also gives time for more problems to arise. For us, if we lose a handle on a hotspot or two and things go to hell, or this thing cycles back in once we relax social distancing, and all of a sudden we get a second wave hitting in the summer, and it surprises everybody who thought this thing was going to be completely seasonal. Then you've got the Democrats in a better position to just attack the administration and then start asking for voting uh, changes, vote by mail, vote by email, or vote by telepathy, whatever. They'll be able to use that in any which way form, and they already are really starting to talk about that stuff. So yeah, it's just good for them to. It's just the most depressing part to me, I find, is that there's like a good third of our base that is out there on Twitter, and I guess Facebook. I wouldn't know, I'm not on it. That are basically saying the same thing the Democrats are, or just a different version of criticizing Trump. So you got these people over here on our side that are just like, I don't know what, they're just like egging each other on with this crap, and then you have the Democrats, which is, who can't seem to get their head on straight and reconcile the fact that Trump acted relatively quickly when he figured out that this was a really hairy eyeball from China and just shut it all down. Then to see that in Europe it wasn't going to be contained in Italy, and he saw the early cases expanding in Spain and knew that the UK was staring down the barrel. So he had to shut it off. It was good friend Boris. He had to shut them off too. And now they're going to be in the thick of it now, timing wise, right around the same with us. It's just insanity watching these people who assume that the federal government sits on these massive stockpiles of PPE and or medicine, and it can just roll it out. Roll it out where? How? I mean, why would we disrupt supply chains that exist right now to get? What you want to do is exactly what the admiral said today in charge of logistics, which is you want to get more of everything to the distributors that are being that are and contracted with the hospital systems. I mean, why would you interfere with the system of a hospital getting what they need? So your argument against that, I guess, is that the hospitals are saying they can't get it, and people are bidding the prices up, distributor by distributor or whatever. Well, the admiral made pretty clear that they're in charge of that now. There'll be no more of that nonsense. So, why people think that we would just somehow conjure up or divine 40 million N95 masks and just have them in a big giant part of the mountain out in Colorado Springs, and that we were just going to like show up and bail everybody out. That's just ridiculous, because you can't disrupt the actual supply chain or else you will cause chaos. So all we're doing is right now overseeing the process so that there's no hoarding, that there's no fake um, driving up of cost through bidding. So listen, I'm really confused by the people that are confused. Put it that way. Yes, Cindy. And thank you. I am clearly very impressed with what Steve Mnuchin managed to get through the Senate. Working with, we basically creamed them, got everything we wanted, holstered the biggest weapon the Treasury Department has ever had in the history of this country. And we don't need to shoot every bullet, but the point is we have all the ammo. So what he promised today, I want to be very clear. What he promised today, as far as timing on the money and how it's going to get delivered out, is very pie in the sky. I just, you've heard everybody else say it. We underfunded or basically understaffed the IRS. There are a lot of people that just want to just get rid of the IRS. So there was slim pickings over there. And the Social Security Administration has always been kind of a redheaded stepchild of government. It doesn't get the funding as far as staff and computer upgrades and infrastructure that makes it easy to do their jobs. It's pretty antiquated. So now Mnuchin's up there saying that we're going to somehow find a way to get millions of Americans, millions, tens of millions of Americans money in the next 2 to 5 weeks. Is just like, it's a hell of a tall order. Even with the people that they're bringing in from the private sector to assist. If he can get it done, like I said, I tweeted today that he should have a statue. He should have a statue of the Department of Treasury right down there next to the White House. It should be a Steve Mnuchin statue with the goofy glasses and a big smile on his face to reside for as long as this country is alive. Because if he could pull this off, it's going to be amazing. And if he can't, we're going to be playing a lot of political hot potato because now it's on us, right? I mean, Congress authorized the money. Money's theoretically there. And we can't seem to find a way to get it to the people in time when the rent's due and the grocery bills too much. Well, then it's on us, So Mnuchin, I think, is in the eye of the storm. Say a prayer for that guy. Yeah, Navarro is a very whew, Navarro is almost like a high school football coach, when he gets up there, or a retired sergeant major from the Marines. He's a, which he's not, but I'm just saying he's just very much like that, very motivated. He thinks quickly, talks quickly. He evidently acts pretty quickly as well. So I'm finally content with this administration's cabinet for the first time, I think, ever, everywhere except the DHS acting Secretary Wolf. I mean, where would we be? Where would we, honest to God, be without William Barr, Steve Mnuchin? I just, yeah, and of course Mike Pompeo. I mean, it just scares the shit out of me to think of where we'd be without those guys. They are just superstars. They're titans. They are the exact opposite of the way we came out of the gate. And I'm so glad we got rid of Gary Cohn and decided to keep Mnuchin, because he's just been growing into the role. And Mnuchin took a lot of heat from the president for recommending Jay Powell for Fed chairman. And turns out Chairman Powell was right all along. He played it. He played this thing out the best he possibly could. And Trump put so much pressure on him, more pressure than anybody's ever put on a Fed chairman, ever. And he resisted it. And thank God he did, because that gave us the room to move, to make these financial maneuvers that could literally save 60 to 90 days of recession time and get back up that much quicker. So a hell of a job. I just got to say, a hell of a job by Chairman Powell and the governors of the federal board. And I have never said that before out loud ever. And just thank God I can say it, because they all came together. It's almost like where would we be if we hadn't had that economy rolling along where it was? Interest rates kind of like trying to creep back up, make sure inflation's down, and it stayed down. And sure, we didn't unwind the bank sheet enough, but we tried. We did like a half a billion of it out of a couple trillion unwound off there, which opens up space and liquidity for what we're doing now. It's just it's as bad as this is, it could have been so much worse. It's the timing of this whole thing is such where if it would have happened earlier, I'm not sure that would have. I think some of that year-end sell-off stuff. I think we would have been in trouble. And if it would have happened, even a month later, I don't know that we'd have a chance to get back into a level playing field on the economy to win re-election. So we still have time. We still have a lot of time to do this, but you can't just let the airline industries collapse. As Mnuchin said today, they're a very critical part of our national infrastructure and national security. And there's plane, trains, and automobiles are something that this country is always going to be built on. And judging by the fact that Levin and others are already flipping out about the notion of an infrastructure bill because they don't understand, it's going to be tough for us to do phase 4 if phase 4 is required, because Nancy's going to come looking to drink from a fire hose on this round. And it won't be just 75 million for the Kennedy Center, trust me, or whatever the hell that 25 million and 75 for museums and whatever the fuck it is. So Cindy wanted to know what you were saying about Fauci. And if I cut you off, I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish that thought.
What?
Cindy Pittman wants to, Glenn, what were you saying about Fauci?
When? Not
I
tonight.
don't know. I thought maybe I cut you off on something. And
Fauci is he's like a hospital administrator. He you would never go to him for surgery or even for a consultation of any kind. but he has a scientific background and he interfaces well with politicians, military guys, and he's great in front of a microphone or behind a microphone, rather.
Oh, it's Twitter. She said it must have been a tweet.
Yeah, that's basically what, that's what my father felt about him. And actually, you'll see the kind of people that are good at a podium in front of the cameras, interfacing with politicians, media types, are not the guys that are going to be superstars in the lab. It never happens that way. Ever. And it doesn't happen that way in medicine. It doesn't happen that way in technology. It's different skill set. Totally different skill set. So you can hate Fauci all you want for being fake and bullshitting and whatever, but you need someone who's media savvy. What do you think the libs call Trump? He's a bullshit artist, right? He manipulates the media. He lies. Yeah, well, okay. But see, then what's your definition of telling the truth, right? Telling the truth is what? Communism is good. Karl Marx was a genius. Come on. Trump is very effective as a media manipulator. More effective than any Dem. And if you're going to have somebody who's going to go back to the actual scientists and try to explain what the political game plan is and try to fit their world into the political world, you can't just bring a superstar in the laboratory and put him in front of the cameras. It'll be a complete and utter disaster. And that goes, in my own industry, in technology, I'm not the greatest technology guy you're ever going to meet. I mean, my serious years of getting my, rolling up my sleeves and getting my hands dirty, it ended sometime in the 90s when I went management. But all it requires to be an effective manager is to understand the technologies, not necessarily being able to implement them at the micro level, right? So, I mean, I think a lot of people are thinking somehow Fauci, when he's not in front of that camera, is in a laboratory in a white lab coat, going through every piece of data and, preparing the slides or, getting the microtome slides, samples ready for the electron microscope. That's nonsense. He's a guy who can speak in the nomenclatura of scientists, to scientists. And he also can speak political English. And you need these intermediaries, right?
I've been around long enough.
Right. I mean, I've been one of these intermediaries for 30 years. We're a rare breed that can interface with the technologists. I can talk for hours and understand what hardcore technologists are saying. I might not be able to do it. I certainly probably couldn't. But I know what they're saying. I understand what they're saying. And I can then translate that to people who have no technical skills. The exact same thing in medicine, right? So if you're going to get promoted to become like a chairman in a medical school of a department, my dad was a chairman of the Department of Anatomy in New York Medical College for 20 years. But the only reason they gave him that position is he did a lot of research, published a lot of papers, got some fame, and then parlayed it into an actual executive career in medicine. But his output in the laboratory dropped precipitously when he became management. And if you get to the level of Fauci, I don't think you're doing the only way his name is going on any papers is because someone he got them grant money and they did him the favor. That's part of the deal. But he's not in the lab. And so we need someone like him. I mean, look, during the AIDS crisis, there was a lot of bullshit going on.
Yeah.
He was a young man at the time. He certainly wasn't. I mean, he was too young to really matter back in the 80s. But, this isn't his first rodeo. That's the thing.
No, he's considered a hero of that cause, and he's the one who led all the activists kind of into the circle.
Listen, don't get me. You want me to say horrible things about him? Keep going, okay?
Yeah,
I'm just
exactly. But
I'm just going to say that if it's not him, there's another two or three who are exactly like him to
yeah.
replace him, and it wouldn't make a fucking shit's worth of difference, right?
The other thing people have to understand is you can't just if Fauci's not if Fauci wasn't on the stage one day, it was always where's Fauci, where's Fauci. The media has an expectation that Trump is going to shit can anyone who disagrees with him on this. He doesn't believe in science. He follows his instinct. Blah 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 blah. It does, even if Trump thinks Fauci's an asshole, which he probably does, there's nothing he can do about it. He's there. He's
Yeah.
been there since 1980 whatever, and he's not going anywhere. And if you do shit can him, it's worse than you'll have a bigger flare up than firing Mueller or yeah,
It
even
wouldn't
Mueller.
matter
Definitely
because
don't.
all the scientists, if you ask, look, if you ask a scientist at dinner, hey, what do you think about this COVID-19? You're going to get one story. You put
Mhm.
their name on the dotted line and attach national policy to what they tell you, you're going to get a much play it safer type of reaction. And
Yeah.
that's what we're
Well,
seeing.
I
You
see
don't think
that.
you get rid of Fauci, then there's another five guys that will replace him, and nobody in their right mind is going to give any, unless they're insane, is going to give any answer that isn't completely playing it safe, maybe overstating things because you never know the future. No one can predict what's ever going to happen. And the last thing you want to be
Yeah,
is the guy in
I want to make.
charge and something
I
got
want to make
away
it.
from you and a million people died and that's it.
Yeah,
You know.
yeah, and your name's on the line, like you said. I want to make it very clear that the task force is led by as chief medical advisor to Vice President Pence is Dr. Birx. That's her position. Fauci essentially issues his version from the National Institute of Health. The CDC does their thing, and then the Army Meds they do their thing, and they all have this way of bringing things forward. Dr. Birx is the one that's really in charge of communicating that to the vice president, the president, and to the American people. Fauci's just kind of spouting off on interviews all the time. They just send him out there to talk,
That's his
and
sweet spot though.
that's
I
a sweet
mean,
spot for him. And he
yeah.
doesn't impact any changes. He doesn't say to the president, we're you need to shut down. Yeah, he's actually said to the press, you need to close this whole country down, really. And Trump said that's ridiculous. I'm not doing that. And if that's not good enough for people to understand Fauci's role, Fauci at this point in his career, this is a twilight moment for him. This is
Mhm.
like his second shot of hitting the bingo
Yeah.
that came out of the AIDS crisis. He's not going to let one interview go unanswered. For God's sakes, he's doing podcasts with like Barstool Sports and Steph Curry from the NBA. I mean, he's not turning it down. I bet you if we wanted Fauci to come on here, he would. Of course, we don't need that. Um, but people understand. They have to understand that in the on the grand matrix of government authority, the National Institute of Health is like right down here. It's not driving. It's not driving the national narrative on what we're going to do as far as dealing with the pandemic. It's on the matrix. It's in the pyramid, but it's definitely not boxing out the CDC or trampling all over the FDA and taking over Dr. Birx's lead position, advising the vice president and thereby the president. So Dr. Birx is far and away the one that'll finally be the one that has to go to Trump and say something uncomfortable. She was the one who went along with Mike Pence to tell the president that the guidelines needed to be extended, not another 15, but 30 days, something he wasn't exactly thrilled to hear at first. It wasn't Dr. Fauci. I mean, Fauci, of course, thinks 30 days is like the shortest possible. So people giving this, the Bill Mitchells, the idiots out there that think that Fauci's secretly playing with some marionette strings. It's just not how this thing is set up. This is not how the task force is set up. What we're quietly trying to keep from the American television is how much of this has been taken over by the military just due to the fact that government is really dysfunctional and the military is about as concrete and firm as you can get in a logistical response situation in a pandemic. And they're the ones that are slowly overtaking the authorities that were originally divvied up, to HHS through Al-Azhar and the CDC guy that's not even on the stage anymore. The military is taken over. The military they have duplicate, redundant technology and expertise that all of our other agencies do, and they're taking over a lot of these operations. And I think that's also true in the cases of antibody testing and drilling down on a vaccine. I think it's more likely the military is going to be at the forefront of this because it's a national emergency. I mean, it literally is threatening the country. It's a national security issue, clear and present danger. So that's not something Americans are used to seeing on television. So we're trying to limit that and only put our most well-versed, except for the admiral today, who's probably not used to being in front of a microphone. If you want to find one guy geekier than a logistics guy, find an admiral in logistics. He's just not. He doesn't know how to deal with that shit. But we're putting our most affable faces in the military on television, trying to be a friendly, comforting face. But behind the scenes, it's not about comfort, even though that's what the ship is called in New York. I'd be surprised if that ship ever hit 25% capacity because they're so concerned. This ship is strictly for non-COVID cases, but we know that a lot of these people are asymptomatic, can test negative and then test positive. And we know what happens on ships. And that's an open bay medical facility on those ships. So the last thing the military wants is just to bring in a bunch of New Yorkers and infect an entire ship. That was called the Comfort. So I don't, I know we have a couple patients in there, but right now Cuomo and de Blasio are telling the New York Police Department and their dispatch that cardiac arrest patients are not even to be brought into the hospital. So you're not even getting your life-saving ventilation or paddles on the way to the hospital anymore. You're pretty much done. And that's out of ass covering for themselves because they don't know if the patient's positive for COVID or not. And they don't want all this stuff. It brings me up to another point, Glenn. I'm glad we steered the conversation to this direction because this is another new Twitter phenomenon for assholes that are born from the Laura Loomers of the world are now filming their local hospitals' emergency rooms to show that there's no real virus. It's to show that this isn't a big deal at all. You know that the last place you're going to find people who might even test positive for COVID is in the emergency room. You know what else you're not going to find in the emergency room? Somebody who thinks they broke their toe, somebody who thinks they might be having a heart attack, but they're not really sure, somebody who thinks that their insulin levels are too out of whack, they need to see a doctor, somebody who thinks there's a lump, but they're not really sure and it started to bleed, so they're going to go to the emergency room. They cut themselves, they might need stitches. They're not going right now to the emergency room because they know what the best place to get infected is at a hospital. And a hospital knows the best place to infect the rest of the hospital is to allow these patients to be treated in the emergency room. That is not how we're triaging these patients. There's entire wings that are separated. You will not see them. You can't walk around with your cell phone. That's where all the COVID-19 patients are. Just stop being an idiot and an asshole and running over to your local hospital and showing how dead the emergency rooms are. The emergency rooms are so dead that they're laying off nurses, that they're furloughing nurses for a short time because nobody's getting shot in the street. Nobody's getting stabbed. Nobody's getting beat up because we're pretty much locked down. And like I said, if you think you broke your thumb or your toe, you're not going in there. You're not going to risk your life over, maybe a broken bone. So of course the emergency rooms are going to look like a desert. Don't be dumb. I mean, if you take a step back and just look at this, you don't have to be an admiral in charge of logistics to see that just normal critical analysis of the situation is good enough to see where the problems are and where they're not, and see where the bullshit news is fake and where it potentially could be real. I mean, I don't know if we've just been doing this now for a couple of years about everything, that it's becoming second nature to be able to pick up what's true and not true, and what's stupid and what's not stupid. But I can tell you, for me personally, it takes a millisecond to be able to discern something as possible or likely and something worth looking into. And then the flip side of it being so remote and so ridiculous that Occam's razor forbids or prohibits me from even opening up a search engine to check it out. And that's where I'm at on this thing. I mean, I'm just sorry to see so many people on our side get sucked into this vortex of bullshit led by the swaddling cartoon man and the gorilla pill monkey man, Cernovich. And, it's just, when is enough enough, people? When is enough enough? It's
I
always
don't
got to be
see
a
him anymore. I finally blocked him, so he's gone.
What's that?
I finally blocked Cernovich. I don't have to
Oh,
see his bullshit anymore. I feel better. I feel like when I clean that bear shit off my stairs.
yeah.
The
Boy,
real, you
you're up
want to
and
talk about the fakest of fake news? The fakest of fake news is that either de Blasio or Cuomo are worth putting on the television other than as an object of derision. I mean, here are two guys that have been sitting around for more than 6 years doing nothing, taking all the federal money and literally setting it on fire with gender identity programs and lesbian waitress association donations and all this other garbage. And it's clear, well, I mean, it's been clear to me for a long time. That's why I left, right? But I think it's becoming clearer to more people than ever that the people running New York State and especially New York City have been dead asleep, probably for 20 or 30 years, and that there really is no excuse. They can keep saying the president, the president, the president, but why are the ICUs overloaded? Because the state never bothered to come up with any kind of contingency plans to create, let's say, using high school gymnasiums and setting up, like the military does, independent air circulation, creating,
oh yeah.
essentially, you could, listen, here's the thing. When you're saying that moving forward, we're going to be in a good position for future epidemics and pandemics, I don't see how it could be. I don't see how it couldn't be, being how unprepared most of these blue states are. They've been wasting money for the last
Yep.
20 or 30 years. I mean, listen, they have paid that these fucking whack jobs on the New York City Council. One of these days, I'm going to bring a file I have and start reading to you some of the insane bios of who's on the city council. It reads like people in a mental asylum, the kind of things that they do and say. These guys have been sitting around passing laws, how to financially punish or imprison people who use the wrong gender pronoun in a restaurant. I don't need to make this stuff up because it's real. That's what they've been working on the last 5 years. But a pandemic contingency plan, nothing. How about just a basic contingency? And don't bring up Giuliani either. Giuliani's just all these. We have gone since probably the 1940s, 50s. We haven't had shit for leadership in New York City. What to speak of New York State? Adam and I on Saturday were trying to figure out when was the last good governor of New York, and he actually he made me laugh. He said George Pataki's first term. He said first term, and I thought about it. I've been thinking about going, actually everyone else is so horrid that the first term of Pataki actually could be viewed in New York terms as like a golden age, right? I mean, but that's not saying anything about Pataki. It's saying a lot about who we usually have sitting in Albany. It's pathetic.
Yeah, we have the same thing here. I mean, but your Pataki was our Tom Bridge, really,
Mm-hmm.
and ever since we've just been screwed with just shit for almost 20 years.
This current governor in Pennsylvania is like somebody from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, and I'm talking about the patients. I'm not talking about the doctors, right? I mean, Danny DeVito comes to mind. Remember his performance? It was
Oh, yeah.
like woo, like that's yeah. But listen, Wolf is like a genius compared to De Blasio. That's how sad it is. I don't know, man. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's
I mean, you've got Cuomo on there every day, and he has nothing really to say. He's getting, if you notice, he's getting more and more hostile as people are finally asking him real questions. I thought
yeah, I
that was
think
kind of.
it's so frustrating when all of a sudden people are like, "Oh man, we should ditch Biden for Cuomo," and then all of a sudden people start reading back, stories from a week ago, and Cuomo saying, it's fine, go out, live your life, all the crap De Blasio did, turning down the opportunity for basic bargain price for 16,000 ventilators a couple of years ago, not knowing that the federal government sent the 4,000 ventilators last week in New Jersey at the warehouse where he didn't know they were at, even though he was told they were at. And then having to admit that he lied, and they do have enough ventilators for now. And he's essentially trying to hoard for more so other states don't get them. That's essentially what's going on in New York. New York. So what today was about, why bring up this admiral that's been in charge of the logistics, is because we just pounded the press over the head with how much we are sending New York. I mean, millions of everything. And that includes another couple hundred ventilators that they're not even in need of right now. Um, so they've just been busted as they're kind of like hoarders themselves. They're hoarding supplies, and the feds know what's up. And that was what the bulk of today's news conference was about.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was a message sent, message hopefully received. Uh, yeah, I'm not really worried about this stupid oversight committee that Clyburn's going to be heading up. That was in the bill. That was something we knew was going to be there, but it's got Republicans on it too, and there's not going to be any gotcha crap over it. It's more or less there to look at the oversight of the money distributed, not about our preparedness or anything like that, or decisions that Trump made or when or anything like that.
Do you think the Democrats are at this point just desperate to be part of the news cycle? I mean, other than a few whack jobs like AOC, it seems like the Democrats' mic got cut about a week and a half
Yeah,
ago.
I think you're right. I think well, I mean, I especially think it's true of Biden himself. I mean, I think the Democrats are thinking, they're probably calling up the Biden campaign every day, saying, do something, because then at least we'll have something to talk about if you say something. Schumer tried to write that letter, and he took a big swing and a miss because he asked us
Fucking
to appoint a
Schumer.
guy that showed up on stage today.
Yeah.
And I read the letter that Trump sent back to Schumer, and it was pretty good.
Question.
So
I have a political question for you. If this was not post impeachment, right? Had the Democrats allowed Trump to be president in a normalized way and, ran their playbook like their usual playbook, which is respectful but devious. They're respectful for the office, like what they did with W, right? And what they did with Reagan and what they did with, well, Nixon is a special case. But anyway,
yeah, that's
you run the playbook, but you're not overtly hostile. You don't take the optics in front of the press and the public as you hate this guy. They
mhm.
they have gone so far into the hate zone that I was just trying to wonder in my own head if they hadn't done it. If they hadn't weaponized the hatred, do you
Mhm.
think that the normal instinct of the Democrats now would be to try to get having some of their big shots standing with Trump at these press conferences and having their governors also getting interviewed? Like if things were more normal, it would seem more like a group effort so everyone could kind of eat.
it, it's apparent to me that every time somebody makes even the slightest overture from a blue state, that there's
Yeah,
an
but
immediate rebuke.
that's not my question. My question is, forget reality as it is today. Let's say Jeb Bush had won, God forbid.
Well, that's a
And
totally different question then. Yeah,
well, if we had another president, a Republican president, do you think what would the normal way this would be done? It would be more bipartisan, wouldn't it? I mean, you'd have
no, there would
Democrats.
be, yeah, governors hustling like Fat Boy Christie hustled during Sandy, if you recall the hug on the tarmac right
I
before
was
the election.
amazed that such a
Yeah,
morbidly obese guy could run so
yeah.
fast toward the dollars, man.
Yeah, that would be where it's at right now. I mean, it's not happening with Trump just because the the level of vitriol from the Democrat leaders of all levels disallows anybody to say anything nice. And if they try to, they just get like crushed. So there's no, you know, there's no chance for them to stand with Trump. And then, Trump, some people question why Nancy Pelosi wasn't at the signing of the bill. I don't know if she was disinvited or she wouldn't show up. To me, it seems like she wasn't invited and didn't ask to show up. I think if they grovel before Trump, he'll throw them a bone. So it's almost like a reverse of the normal situation. Yeah, I think if it was Jeb Bush right now, God forbid, I don't know what the hell would be going on, but yeah, I think you'd have Cuomo and Bush
Doing
walking
photo
around
ops,
together in
right?
New York.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah,
So
you would have that. You would
that
have
would be the normal way this would go down, right? You'd have like President Pence and Cuomo taking turns talking at the podium, bringing in Fauci as necessary and whatever doctors. And that could be Tuesday, and then on Thursday he could be in another state, like with Newsom. But I just don't know. I mean, after they impeached him for bullshit, for nothing, basically. Um, I mean, I don't know. Do you think America realizes how dangerous that impeachment was to our survival as a republic? I mean, we're seeing it now that our government it cannot come together, and it's not Trump's fault. Trump was elected to on a certain platform, and he was more effective than most in trying to deliver. That's his only real sin. And what they did to him was so unforgivable that now basically it's Donald Trump, Pence, and a couple of doctors are doing everyday press conferences. And the Democrats are silent, other than a few whack jobs on Twitter saying Trump is killing people or whatever. But
yeah, yeah.
there's nothing in between. It's either insanity or silence. And I
Well,
don't
you
know.
got governors like that fat piece of shit up in Illinois, Pritzker, who's just screaming because Chicago, if there's one city that's probably could compete with New York with having a bunch of assholes not knowing what the hell they're doing at the helm, it's Chicago. So clearly, they're not ready. The Cook County's, not prepared for this stuff, can't function. Everything going to hell. They've got all kinds of problems. So what do? You call a press conference, just bash the shit out of Trump, and that's a dangerous, dangerous way to go. But listen, at the end of the day, for Trump, a lot of people are talking about the GDP. A lot of people are talking about the jobless claims. What's going to be the metric on reelection? I think since we are in this, strange world of having to follow charts and swinging numbers and not knowing exactly what this thing is. Is it airborne? Is it not airborne? Whatever, blah, 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 blah. I think it's dead bodies that I'm most afraid of. Uh, that's my biggest fear. Those are the images of a failed leader that can get you unelected. I mean, if we end up, you know, hundreds and thousands of people dead, it's really hard for us to turn around and say, well, the governors weren't prepared. It's just going to be easy for Biden to say that didn't happen when we were in charge, even though that obviously the swine flu and H1N1 or whatever the hell else it was under them was a completely different animal. He'll be able to say, we stopped Ebola, we stopped this, we stopped that. And frankly, there won't be video of overrun morgues or refrigerated trucks everywhere, dead bodies. So there's really no way to hide like 4 or 500,000 dead Americans. You just can't do it. I mean, it's like more than World War II. I mean, you can't hide it. So it wouldn't be Trump's fault, but it's definitely in his best political interest to limit the amount of dead bodies, because that is something that is just will be tattooed onto the independent voter's mind, even more knowing that we can recover as an economy eventually. And they look at Biden as some kind of extension of Obama. And it's one of those rare nostalgic candidates that you get every now and then. And the reason that Al Gore didn't win in 2000 was because people were not nostalgic about Clinton at that time. It was like, okay, we're ready. We're done with you. His numbers spiked to 98, but by 2000, they were not great. And there was no time to miss him. So, Gore separated himself from Clinton and lost. So now you got this, times are in crisis. Times are tough. We want to get back to normal, non-confrontational, whatever. Biden is an appealing choice to a lot of moderates and independents in the swing counties and a couple of the swing states. So that's hard to argue with. Yeah, it won't matter how clueless Biden is. It really won't. I mean, you have to understand that. And I think that's why you've got normally sane people like Richard Barris, having his Twitter feed look like Bill Mitchell's for a day or two, is because, he's a smart guy. He understands that Biden is kind of a static candidate. He's not really going to go up that high. He's not really going to go down that low. So he remains a threat, that's for sure. Just by virtue of the states that we have to win. So if we could keep this to a minimum, I hope people are right. I hope that there's like a real bad influenza season number that we can somehow work our way through, like 40, 50,000, which is pretty. I mean, if you think about losing that many people, it's a lot. But when people talk about flu season, they're talking about the beginning and the end, meaning it's over 2 years, not 2 full years, but so you talk about losing 40 or 50,000 people in a matter of 2 months. That's the kind of stuff that piles up and becomes really noticeable. So let's hope that we don't have that. So everyone is just reacting so different medically to this thing that I still think even our scientists are just completely perplexed. They have no idea. It's just not quite sure why some people are more susceptible, more people asymptomatic, spreading it before they become symptomatic, or if they ever become symptomatic, others getting it and getting absolutely knocked out. A lot of hospitalization is between 20 and 44 that require hospitalization, which is just lower fatality rate than the over 60, but they're still struggling to figure out what's going on here. And that's squarely laid at the feet of China. And our media is not willing to call out China at all. That's all part of the plan.
Because they're
That's all part
beholden
of
to
it.
China for either they're owned by Chinese or they're taking a lot of Chinese money through ads.
Yeah,
So that's
China.
not going to be happening. That's one of the risks. Why do you think the NFL really wants to take the Chinese side over Americans? No, but they do. Why? Because that's where their money. That's their burgeoning new market is China, not the U.S. People are getting tired of watching this crap on TV. I
Yeah, but
certainly
yeah,
do.
I look at this. I see China really under the eye of the microscope now. They're really going to get reevaluated globally, particularly Europe.
Hmm.
They kind of champion these Islamic regimes like Iran and the communist regime in China. They're just
Well,
They're
they're
just getting
playing. Listen, they're
ravaged right
playing the
now.
same games the Russians were playing 20 or 30 years ago, which is the theory. Like, if we can kind of hobble together all of the countries that are feeling disenfranchised from the
Yeah,
unipolar American world. Maybe if we got enough ones, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, we get enough of those, it'll equal
yeah,
America's 800. You know.
yeah. The enemy of the enemies. They're running out of the enemies of our enemies. So I
Well,
mean, it's
listen,
kind of
if Trump is successful in turning India to our side finally after
yeah.
50 years in the wilderness, China's fucked basically. They've run out of moves at this point, you know.
If we could turn India into a manufacturing country instead of this, you know,
Call center nightmare.
call center IT engineering stuff, if we could really, if we could swing that, and I think it'd be better for everybody over there. Really, I think you're looking at higher wages. They're not all competing at the same, colleges, coming out with the same degrees, and then having to try to get over to America, or you've been to London.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, it's a
they're if you think
deformed.
it's bad in America,
The
I mean,
Indians
they're
have
all over.
created like a deformed prosperity where if you're talking about IQ quotient, the top 5% of their society IQ wise is moving into the middle class. Everyone else is going the other way. And it's because it's a sick thing. If they became more on the manufacturing side, then everyone in their society from 90 IQs to 140 IQs could be working. And it would be
Yeah.
better. It's better to have a widespread industrial, some kind of base, whether it's services or industry or manufacturing. If it's only
Mhm.
the top 3% high IQ guys, I don't. For me, that's a recipe for a revolution at some point. You know, because it's elitism
Well, so yeah,
on top of elitism,
You can
right?
imagine. You can imagine how China would react to that. I mean, that would just be a total threat to their
Yeah.
one world, one China, blah blah, one sun, or whatever they call it. So, it's a long way from becoming reality. But somebody mentioned that India is forbid the export of chloroquine. It's because they have 1.2 billion people, and they might get really, really sick,
Yeah.
and it's one of the only treatments that work. So of course they're going to want to kind of keep some of the drugs to
Absolutely.
themselves. But they're pretty brutal over there too. I noticed, and
Yep.
we've heard a lot of stories that you told us about how they function with self-governance, self-policing, and
Hmm.
all types of weird honor code type things. So they're pretty brutal over there about enforcing quarantines, and in
Absolutely.
their own way,
They
not
got
quite as
one
bad as
thing
China.
going for them. They're not going to be fucking around with dead bodies, right? In India, maximum amount of time from the time you die to the time you get cremated. If it's
Mhm.
24 hours, you're a very important person. That means they have to arrange some big program. The actual interment or the of the ashes. I mean, they're literally taking people off the street. When I was a kid, they take them off the street, throw them in the back of a wagon, and those people are incinerated within 4 to 5 hours. They're not screwing around, right? It's like ancient Rome. Um, Over here, we have these crazy ideas. Everyone gets buried, like in a tomb situation with a fancy, everything's so fancy, and that's going to fuck us in the long run. You watch. And I think if this thing really does become a true epidemic and we start seeing big death numbers, I think that's one of the first things that will change in our society is this
Yeah,
idea that everyone gets interred in a fancy coffin and embalming, and it's just not
yeah.
possible, right? It's not
Or at
possible.
least it would be delayed indefinitely, and you'd literally be sitting in a warehouse somewhere. If you pay for a plot, maybe you'll get eventually buried. If it really were to be, I'm not going to be macabre enough to go into this conversation like that, but you lose 30, 40,000 people in a space of 1 month.
Yep. It's
It's overwhelming. Especially in 1, 2 different metro areas.
Yeah, but see, that's why I'm saying that these Eastern countries are much more geared to deal with that kind of horror because horror is all
Yeah,
they've been dealing with for the last
Oh yeah.
500 to 800 years.
Mhm.
But then again, the amount of wealth we have, there's a lot of options there. Anyway, all of it to me comes back to the Chinese and a couple of these lib governors have basically created a nightmare scenario for us. And because our media is so fucked up, they will never be brought to task for it. Only the public can make that decision on their own. And I just don't know how. I don't see how New Yorkers. It's going to take some really extreme things for them to reconsider their 50-year odyssey toward liberalism.
Twist Mint would like you to check your website.
Let's see.
I believe
Oh, we have a donation. Yes, we have
donation.
a donation from uh, Gordon and from Mary. I want to thank
Okay.
both Mary and Gordon for donating on the website, which is the best way really to donate, and that's MAGA. You can see it's coming up here on the ribbon, magacoalition.com/donate. And you notice, Adam, that we're not getting any more complaints that the form isn't working.
Well, that seems to have been fixed.
Yes, the fix was we're not using Square anymore. So fuck you, Square. You made me jump through all kinds of hoops to get the account, and then it seems like if you're using a debit card that has MasterCard or Visa imprinted on it, which is like every debit card, then Square will decide sometimes that they're not going to process it. So we don't need you anymore. You're gone. And look, the form is still working. So that's capitalism in action.
X cube is fine. Yeah. Well, there you go. With your technical expertise, nothing is impossible. Perturbed is saying, Adam, you were saying earlier, you think Biden will win. Well, I think he'll win the nomination. I don't think he's going to win the election. I think he wins the election if we lose control of a virus. I think, obviously, you stack up 150,000 bodies in 8 weeks. I think that's going to be pretty hard for us to turn a blind eye from. Provided that doesn't happen, I think we're fine.
Yeah, I think that it's an election year. And so a lot of what's going on, as crazy as it might seem, it's actually not crazy. If this wasn't an election year, who knows? But the Democrats just impeached our president. Don't forget it. You know, they're going to be acting very crazy because there's no way look, the optics are clear to me. The president looks presidential.
Mm-hmm.
He finally has that air of seriousness that even his independent voter detractors were saying was missing.
Yeah.
Right?
You do agree with me that it's they can't cover these press conferences anymore. I mean, it is like our enemy networks just can't do it because it's showing America what a handle he managed to get around this entire situation. Listen, no president puts himself in a position to answer every single one of the questions. In a time like this, there are always shifting responsibilities, and you're always trying to get off of a liability for having to answer something personally. And frankly, you don't want to be wrong, and so you kind of turn to your experts. Obama could never have done anything like he would be stuttering all over the place about this. Certainly, Bush could barely handle any of the stuff he would send out. Rumsfeld, anytime there had to be some war news. I look at, I think Clinton is the only one who had the mental faculties to
Yep.
even try to do what Trump is doing, but he never even did it. And it's just why I just think that's why they can't continue to show the press conferences. Trump is just a guy that he's locked in, he's holed up, and this is the one way to get Donald Trump to become an expert is literally don't let him out, lock him up, tell him that this will decide his legacy as a president. And all of a sudden, he is like laser focused. He is driving this thing literally like a team of horses. Everybody's got their job. He is asking for constant updates. There are no excuses. He's picking up in accountability. In order to truly hold people accountable as an executive, you have to understand what you've charged them with by a delegation. So you have to understand somewhat what you've asked them to do. A really good CEO, a top executive will always be that way. That's what's happening with Trump. Is just Trump is becoming so involved at every granular level of this response that he is now becoming an expert on things that he couldn't even pronounce 2 months ago. And they can't, I think to a certain, that explains a little bit what we were talking about earlier about the deafening silence of the Democrats and how we just ran roughshod over them with that phase 3 spending bill. I mean, what could they do? It's really fascinating. All they can do is just make these crazy assertions that he's lying every day in a press conference. We can't show up because he's lying. What?
Yeah, I mean, if the president doesn't flub this, then all the credit goes to him because the Democrats have taken themselves out of the equation completely. So if he fucks up, all the pain comes to him.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't fuck up, then all the credit comes to him. It's a dangerous time, I think, to be the president and to be a Democrat, frankly.
Oh, isn't it like a game of chicken right now? I mean,
Totally.
it's just like there's
But
only
every time
it's
they've played chicken with the president, they've lost.
that's true, and this is the biggest game of chicken of all. It's like, and also Americans are very confused if they catch you rooting for a virus for political gain, and some of that stuff's starting to seep through in the coverage of. Boy, China did a much better job of stopping this thing in its tracks than America, which of course we all know is it's just a horse shit. And we have
Well,
satellite images from space showing. Speaking of crematoriums,
yeah.
they're going
I
to
mean,
the
they
tune of
were,
50,000 a
yeah,
day.
I mean, they were throwing, according to the stuff that I've heard from people who are over there, that I'm not going to say they've done it. What I will say is many people on the ground in China believe that the Chinese government, in their haste to flatten the curve, willfully put plans in place to basically exterminate living people. That they
Yeah.
decided it would be better that people that are alive should not be alive and that their remains should be incinerated very, very quickly. That's what, this is kind of like all these guys who are talking about how great China is. Then what we should be doing is just rounding up anyone who we should be testing everyone, and anyone who is positive for coronavirus should be shot in the head and then burned. That's the Chinese. This is the Chinese method, right? And so, how sick a person would you have to be to want that? That's like
To
one step
defend it.
away from like Buchenwald, basically.
Yeah, I mean the early stories before they really knew what was going on was, they just put them in these empty building and empty hotels. They'd locked them in and welded the door shut. Came back 7, 10 days
Yeah.
later, and they were all dead.
That's the
And
Chernobyl method, right? It's like when in doubt, create a giant lead coffin and weld it over
Mhm.
the problem, and then ignore it for
Yeah.
30 years and hope it goes away, right? I mean, this is, but just don't look at the three eyed fish. They are disturbing. Huh? It's a nonsense. All this is insanity. If you think that the Chinese, A, have dealt with this properly, and B, that any of the things that they have done are in any way palatable to a free country that values human life. If you're rooting for the Chinese, I don't see it as any different from like rooting for Stalin or Hitler, basically. I mean, they're doing
Yeah.
inhuman things. And if you caught this recently, in the last couple days, I'm seeing now news reports from big news outlets pointing out that for the first time ever in People's Republic of China, the common citizen feels emboldened to criticize their leadership openly on the street without fear of reprisal. To me, that's a major development
Oh yeah,
toward,
I read the article where the family members of the people that were just disappeared in Wuhan that aren't on any list of having died of the coronavirus are openly demanding answers by the thousands and just saying my child or brother or whatever didn't disappear. Where are they? And they're not getting any answers out of the Chinese government. And you notice that the bulk of what we're talking about, particularly what Navarro brought up today, hammering it home, and a lot of congressmen are jumping on too, is we've talked about this for a couple of years since Trump got in. It's like the need to bring back manufacturing, the need to stop trying to compete with no environmental regulations and 12-year-olds making 2 cents an hour. It's impossible. So, but that's exactly what George H.W. Bush signed us up for. That's exactly what Clinton followed through with. And that's exactly what the New World Order has been since then. And we actually have a real opportunity here to shame the shit out of them, military confront them if we have to. And that's going to put them into a spend it all type of Soviet mentality, um, bring them to heel. They don't have the flexibility in their economy to do what we're doing. I mean, we're the big dog. No one in the world can play ball without us. No one in the world could make money investing anywhere but us. And if we cripple China's ability and steer investment away from China and back towards America, it's going to be worth having to resurrect some private unions that will of course follow in its toe, particularly in blue states don't have right to work. But the fact that we can bring back manufacturing and we have like 16, 18 states that are right to work, I mean, that's crazy. We could just be a killer economy bringing back manufacturing here. And the secret to the secret sauce here is to maintain overwhelming military capabilities at all time. And it's the oldest rule in the book, older than Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, is you are only as rich as your military is capable of protecting it and collecting
Mm-hmm.
it as far as debts are concerned. So you have to have both. And when you don't, like post World War II and pre World War II Britain, you end up with real big problems. Doesn't matter if you've got colonized countries spread out throughout the globe, it starts to collapse on you because they're going to default on whatever they owe you, kick you out of their country, and militarily, there's nothing you can do about it. So it is virtually impossible for America to default on its debt. It just, even if we did for some reason, we just would wipe it off and pretend it didn't exist. And if you didn't like it, you would have to militarily confront us or try to put some type of sanctions on us through, the UN or something. It wouldn't work. And plus, that would never happen. So we're too big to fail. We are literally too big to fail. We will always be the biggest and the baddest. And China's just going to have to wake up to reality. They made a huge mistake here. Something got out of hand. And the truth will eventually make its way out about how many people are dead. Unfortunately, it won't be in time to help us with what we need to do. But even if we get this so-called antibody test done, which we're working on right now, if you think it's hard to get people tested, which it is, think about getting people tested by blood for antibodies. I mean, how the hell are you going to do that? It's going to take a while. But first things first, make sure there's a working phase 1 vaccine ready to go out of human into human trials phase 2 by August, September, to probably military and some private sector healthcare workers will be the first ones to receive it, make sure it works. and then hopefully we'll have something over the winter where we can start vaccinating the people that are over 60 or have some comorbidity issues.
I want to thank Tweety Bird for using the form on our website and made a very nice donation. Also, for some reason, she was right. Someone had put her on the YouTube side into the block list. I have removed you from the block list.
Whoa.
By the way, if any of you need to be removed from the block list or think you're being, you can't chat for whatever reason, you're limited in YouTube or uh, Periscope. I don't think it's a problem with Twitch, but you can always reach out to me at New York City Guns on Twitter or go to magacoalition.com and you can use our contact form that goes right into my inbox and I will take care of it. Just like I
Yeah,
did for Tweety Bird. And thank you again for the generous donation, Tweety Bird.
that happens on a night when old Smooch Panda gets a little trigger happy with his finger there. So sometimes people get caught up in that type of crackdown, but we try not to do that. We really have limited number of agitators these days. People have given up trying to harangue and harass us off of this forum, and that just means they understand our resolve, and we don't really have anything to be harangued about. All we are is talking about the truth, and as we see it, know it, or believe it. Most people respect that.
One of the accounts we blocked on YouTube was called "Glenn and Gingrich are assholes." Of course, my name was misspelled, but yours was correctly spelled.
Well, I got to say, we can't get them for false advertising, but we can still block them.
Yeah. Now, I'm looking through this block list now to see if any other names jump out at me that need to be unblocked. Try to be a little. There's a lot of these QAnon research team. There's somebody. What's the research team? Masturbating to a comic book in your mom's basement? Probably.
Yeah.
Remember that guy Cooley who called you a what did he say? He was some guy. Anyway, he's staying on the list.
Hmm.
I think I've got most of. I think I just unblocked 3 people. So I think we're good.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're not the Chinese government.
No.
we let we let people have fun. Yeah, Maddie's right. We went through that, like particularly on the Periscope side, that closer in infusion of closer accounts. It just
They
coming
got
in. That's
mad because I did that vivisection style video of Closer's reputation. Remember that one? It was like
hell
an
yeah,
hour and a
yeah.
half of total goodness, slow roasted goodness on him. They freaked
Yeah.
out, man. They freaked out. But I don't care, man. So I think most of these other accounts look really weird, and I'm glad they're still blocked. I will not lift the block. Um, as I'm going down the list, you can see the different time periods, right? The Q people who attacked us, then the we hate Defango. Why do you talk to Defango people? I'm up into
Uh,
their thing now. Yeah,
didn't DeFango go through his own period where he was getting some hate for why do you talk to Adam and Glenn?
probably
Wasn't that a reciprocal thing? Yeah.
could be. I try not to care about other people's problems, but
Hmm.
in his case, I will. Yeah, okay, so I've went through the list now. I think we're good.
Yeah, I
Um,
did notice that we did not get besieged by Gorka or Lookner fans who were upset at our performance from Saturday night. So I did notice
fucking well.
that.
First of all, Gorka fans, are there any left? I don't know. Lookner, on
I
the
don't
other hand,
know.
I think Lookner's numbers are all people wanting to laugh at him, not with him. I mean, it's like if
Almost
you
like Bill
know,
Mitchell's followers.
maybe Bill Mitchell, like in the '80s during the crack epidemic, there was this one street corner. It was like on, it was like Park Avenue South. It was Park Avenue South, I think it was, and like 26th Street in front of this bank that had closed, and the building was being demolished. And at that one particular place, there were always like this little mini colony of crackheads. This must have been early days of crack, like 82, 83. And you could sit there for hours watching the antics of the crackheads, and it was endlessly amusing. I mean, we're talking high quality entertainment. It's high
How did you
quality
go so
entertainment.
fast from Gorka into crackheads?
Well, I'll tell you,
That
because
was
it's all going to be connected. So here's the thing: it's like you would go hang out to watch the crackheads, just hoping that one of them would lose their minds and really, really go crazy, and that would be an
Mhm.
excellent night, right? And so I think people who are watching Lookner, they're not watching because there's anything of value there. They're watching in hopes he's going to have a complete meltdown and be entertaining, spitting and shaking and screaming. It's a sad commentary, but I totally understand it. I get why people would watch him, but I just would think if I'm him, I wouldn't be all arrogant about my numbers because it's literally people who hate you are watching, hoping to see you like have an. It's like sick people wanting to see someone have an epileptic seizure and are trying to like these bastards who are trying to slip um, scripts into emails to make the rapidly flashing website to induce the epileptic seizures, like that
Oh, yeah,
crazy
the Kurt Eichenwald stuff.
Eichenwald,
Yeah,
yeah, the tentacle porn guy, which is odd, being the tentacle porn. You'd think with all of the animation required to
I
create a
have no
tentacle.
idea, to be honest, what the hell entails.
Yeah, but
No,
that's
no
the
pun
Lookner.
intended.
We'll call that the Lookner effect from now on, which
The
is
Lochner effect.
getting a big audience, but really they're just people wanting to see you fall on your face and
You you've
laugh.
got you've got to go back and get that clip and just isolate it. That's something I think you're going to want on your digital files to bring up every now and then with the
What, the
spittle and the
spitting? Oh,
froth.
dude,
Oh
done.
yeah,
I already have it.
yeah.
I've
Uh,
got it. I also have the. You remember I took that an extract where he was particularly foamy and perturbed, and I chopped it and I put it as a tweet. So that thing's ready. I have that on Dropbox, ready to
I
go
think
at a moment's notice. Yeah.
every now and then we need a third person commentary while we're discussing a subject and say, what do you think about that, Steve? And then just
We could get
wow,
a couple of good extracts from that one.
yeah.
I mean, that one I have of Bill Mitchell
Oh,
insulting gun
oh.
owners. It's dude. I have it in a special file. It's 5 seconds away.
What's
It's ready to go at any moment on Twitter. Every time I
is
see
that
that
the one
asshole.
that Obi took and put the clown music to?
Yes,
Oh
he
my
took the
God, that is
Benny Hill theme. Yeah,
yes, unbelievable,
yeah. That's never.
unbelievable.
And by the way, Bill, that's never going away. If you're still alive in 10 years and you're trying to do a talk show for the homeless, you're going to do a talk show to help the homeless. I will make sure to put that in the
Yeah.
comments somehow. I will never let you live it down. Never.
Listen, I know, and I'll repeat this again for people that are curious about what's going on and whatever cobwebs are left in Bill Mitchell's head and why he's so outraged about this whole shut the economy down thing. And it is because when times are tough, people don't, if they're going to keep that extra $15-$20 to themselves because they might need something, or they're out of work and they're not, I mean, so with Bill, he is alone, um, harasses women digitally, doesn't even leave his whatever short lease of a month-to-month apartment he's currently probably has somewhere. So, I mean, he doesn't really care about any virus. All he knows is that his income is going down, and that really makes him angry. So he lashes out about this stuff. I mean, so if
Yep.
if you're curious, there's no real intellectual reason why he is doing this or hating on Dr. Fauci for some reason. It's because his little funding expeditions are drying up. So
As
too
bizarre
bad
as
though.
Fauci might be as a person, he's, I think, in his 80s now and is still gainfully employed, and people take him seriously. Unlike Bill Mitchell, who's in his 60s and hasn't been taken seriously ever. Yeah, I could see why he is hating on a lot of these guys. I mean, he's a failure of a person. He's never done. Remember his whole thing when we met him was, "Oh, I was a big time recruiter." Well,
Yeah,
we
it
did
was
a little bit
never.
of a deep. I had my wife
Yeah.
do a deep because she's been a recruiter, was a recruiter for a good 25 years, right? So she actually knows what that business is like, and she reached out. No one had heard of him. And that's when we discovered the lies that he was saying he was part of the RNC in North Carolina, which he never was.
Mhm.
All this stuff, by the way, Bill, it's all in a file folder. RAID 5, backed up, baby. I have 2 RAID 5 arrays in 2 different states. It's never going to be destroyed. And I will
Tax
never,
liens.
I'm never let it, the tax liens, um, I'm never going to let you live it down. What you did to the MAGA coalition, I'm not going to forget it ever. And I'm going to make sure, as long as people are listening, I'm not going to let anyone forget. And by the way, Adam,
Mhm.
James, I think I'm getting it right here. I'm not going to use the full names unless they want me to, but James just gave a massive donation using our form that now works all the time, by the way. Did I mention that? On the
Mhm.
magacoalition.com/donate. You see it right up there. Thank you, James. I guarantee you all of that money will be used, A, to keep Adam in the game, and B, to make sure Bill Mitchell never lives down his bullshit.
Yeah,
You have
we
my
could have
word.
picked any name that you see above us up there. We when we started up this business to continue our political analysis and for entertainment purposes only. We could have called ourselves any fancy ass name we wanted to. We could have made up something really cool. But we're not
Can you
we're not gonna let
imagine,
our enemies
dude? Imagine
get
you
away.
never were fired from that show. Although
Yeah,
technically you were
if you can
fired.
get fired
Yeah,
for working voluntarily,
right.
I guess we refer that as the Kramer firing now.
But
And by the way,
imagine had you stayed is what I'm trying to say. Like if you were still doing that show now, where would your head be if like twice a week you're having to
in a
listen to
noose,
Mill Mitchell?
it would be in a noose, I guess. Yeah, no, no, I can't even imagine it. I would say I have nightmares about it, but I don't ever even think about it at all. Brett on the Periscope side would like to know why the National Guard is mobilizing in several states as we speak. It's
Uh,
about freaking time. That's what they're there
National,
for.
because it's a national emergency. I'm thinking. I don't know. Call me
Because
crazy. Uh,
the states call up National Guard. The government does not. So the governors call up National Guards when they need help on the ground, logistically setting up testing centers, getting meals to people, blocking off certain roads if there's infrastructure problems that they don't have the employers or the normal local employees to work. Anything. I mean, you should every state who has more than 5,000 active cases should have National Guard called up to one respect or another. I don't know how many you have at your disposal, but you'd be insane. That's what they're there for. This is when you need them. They're the ones that have their own PPE, and they're the ones that are trained to deal with this stuff. So you'd be kind of crazy not to call up the National Guard. So that's the truth to that. Walking the streets in Boston, I mean they're not doing law enforcement.
they're
There's
probably
no
out
curfew.
looking for some of those good takeout places, right?
Yeah, all they're doing is just there to break up any silly social gatherings or ask people if they need help. Um, they're literally like, you know, the best possible extenuating or exigent circumstance call up you can possibly do is to call up your National Guard. It's when we say National Guard, you tend to think the president calls it up and sends him over to war. That's not the case domestically. The governors call them up for a little help. They do not apply civilian law, and they will not arrest or detain or anything like that. So don't worry about that. They're quite opposite. They're actually there to help you.
Wait, we're getting another one. Today has been a great day for my newly fixed donation form, which is right up there, magacoalition.com/donate. This one is from another very large donation. I'm just going to say the first name from Scott. I want to thank you, Scott. I want to thank all of you. And the instructions say, play Lookner Meltdown. We need a good laugh before I fall out of the tree. I don't have it right now, but I will. Let's see if you're around on SNL Saturday.
Yeah, Saturday night we're gonna do something for you, and
I
he
might.
actually
I'll
did
play
mention,
the audio. We'll play a little Lookner audio for you. A best of.
Scott was actually, I don't know if he's just pulling our tail or leg, but he mentioned earlier in the chat that he literally had, in order to get a reception, had to climb 16 foot up into a tree.
Onto a tree, right?
So,
That's some.
that's going far above and beyond to go up and not only watch the show but donate 16 feet up a tree. These are the people that we
That
love.
reminds me of like in the 70s when we wanted to pick up off the wall sort of UHF broadcasts. We would take those rabbit ear antennas and stand on one leg and touch your face, and maybe you could see a little of that. What was that show we used to like to watch? Uncle Floyd. Floyd, live from a basement in New Jersey. You had to be there, I guess. But thank you, Scott. And let's see. So let's go through them, shall we? I want to thank Scott. I want to thank James. And this one is from June, who I took you off the list there, and of course Gordon and Mary. I want to thank all of you, and it makes me happy because for a couple of weeks I was going crazy because the only time people would ever use the form was to watch it fail, and to then tell me it failed, which was depressing.
People take, I think they take pretty explicit joy in telling you when your technical applications are not working up to their expectations. You can't blame them for that.
Well, it really wasn't my fault, man. It wasn't my fault. But it was my fault for believing that this Square Payments was any good. That was my fault.
Yeah.
Because
I think we got the best of them when we needed it, when we were in our prior structure, and we don't need it anymore. And so we bid you adieu. Farewell. So about a 2-hour show. We're certainly willing to take another couple of questions here. If anybody's got them. Saturday night's coming around the corner real quick. So, we're not going to bore you to death here. But, hey, did anybody notice that there were about a total of 10 million jobless claims coming in, and the market kicked up over 450 points today? I mean, that is the new reality, where we're going to have some swings, like I told you, back and forth, because the market now knows that the liquidity's there. The programs are in place. They're just not effectively getting the money distributed yet. If I could do a brief PSA, I will. If you have a small business, any business, go to SBA.gov, Small Business Administration, SBA.gov. They will uh, lead you to a page that talks about the CARES Act, what's available for you. There's about 5 different sections, almost for everybody who is in small business. And that includes LLCs, small self proprietorship stuff. And, there's something there as a possibility for everybody. And it explains it pretty well. The website is working. So please do yourself a favor. If you're in that business or you have family in that business, make sure they don't go running to the bank before calling the SBA, or at least checking out the SBA website, and then go to the bank or credit union. And if you are fortunate enough to have a credit union or bank that works directly with the SBA already, you will greatly cut down on the time of you being in receipt of your money. And you're also eligible for a specific loan that is almost entirely forgivable, up to $25,000 of emergency. Uh, so you'd be crazy not to, if you're a business owner of any size, do it, because there's a reason it was done, and it's not a time to be proud and try to go out and deliver newspapers for a couple of weeks. It's just, the government is doing its job. Go SBA.gov. For the rest of you, just you're laid off, you're furloughed, you're whatever. You obviously go to your unemployment. You probably got some problems getting through the first couple of days. Once you get through, you will have 100% of your pay covered plus 600. You'll be made whole. So get on that if you haven't done that already. And for the rest of you who are getting a check, you just filed your taxes, and they'll use the bank account number for the transaction of sending you whatever you have, whether it's $1,200 as a single person, $3,400 as a couple, and I'm sorry, 2,400 as a couple, another 1,000 if you have 2 kids, 500 for each kid, or whatever, up to $3,400 will magically arrive in your bank account, hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks. If you are on Social Security or disability, then there's going to be a simple portal for you to sign up on. It's get your bank account information on there, and you may be a week later than everybody else, but you're going to get your money too, hopefully within 4 weeks. So that's the Menuchin dream that's going on right now. That's the scramble that we're doing. So let's hope we can get your money in your pocket. And don't be afraid to call your state representative. Don't be afraid to call your congressman. That's what they're there for. Their offices may be closed, but they have their phones forwarded in all likelihood to a office worker who can assist you. And if not, your county services should definitely be where you go, and you will get the help that you need. It's very uncommon that there'll be people that fall through the cracks of this whole thing. So check it out. Everybody but Bill Mitchell, of course, is eligible and should.
Well, don't you have to work in order to,
Yeah, you gotta do
unless
something.
that's just like giving away free money, then Bill Mitchell might score some, right?
I don't. Patriotic Vegan, I know, does home health care. So I'm not sure your entire salary is per diem. That would be odd. Home health care workers are covered, certainly covered under the bill. Your employer is, you are. If you're still working, um, that's something you have to have a discussion with your employer about, and decide whether or not going into these homes, if you get a hot spot in Nevada, let's just be smart about where you go. Um, but yeah, almost everybody who's been laid off has. But if you're getting paid and your employer is still paying you and your employer is still open and you're considered essential, like a home healthcare worker or something, that's a different That's a different animal. And with that, I want to thank everybody and let Glenn close this up for me. And I will see everybody at 11 o'clock on Saturday night.
Saturday at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard. You got it.
Yeah. And I want to thank everybody again who donated to, these are tough times. So I know you're going the extra mile on that front. So we, like some others on this format, do not take that lightly. So that's from your family to my family type of stuff. So appreciate all of you for tuning in. Nice crowd here. We hit 260 plus tonight, and we hit 70 at one point on Periscope. So seems everything's back to where it's supposed to be. All the glitches are worked out, and that's thanks to the technician with the fabulous head of hair that you see on the other side of my screen.
I have
I will see
multiple
everybody
heads of
else.
hair. They're in bags behind me.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I'll see everybody Saturday night.
Yeah, see you, Adam. There goes Adam. Okay. There I go. Okay. Thanks, everyone. I now have to figure out how to get this new computer working with this headset. Once I've done that, we can start using that to broadcast. I will be around. If you need anything, you can DM me or use the contact form, MAGA Coalition or New York City Guns. Either one will do. See you Saturday, 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Until then, be well, and we'll be chatting soon. Thank you.